Hey, 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 welcome back to 10 Minutes Episode, the podcast where we get into the stuff your textbook never taught you. I'm your host, Marcus, and today we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into something that every single language learner struggles with, but nobody really wants to admit they struggle with. And that thing is small talk.
The silent killer of language confidence.
Yes, Sophia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Marcus. I've been looking forward to this one because honestly, this topic is so close to my heart. I work with language learners every single day, and small talk, or the fear of it, comes up constantly.
Before we get into it, can you just quickly introduce yourself for our listeners who might be meeting you for the first time?
Of course. So my name is Sophia Chen. I am a linguist and cultural communications specialist. I've been working in this field for about 12 years now. I've lived in 5 different countries: the United States, the UK, Japan, Brazil, and France. And my entire career has been built around studying how people communicate across cultures. Not just the words, but everything around the words. The pauses, the gestures, the eye contact, what people say, what they don't say, all of it.
That is such a fascinating background. 5 countries, that's incredible. And I feel like that lived experience gives you such a unique perspective because you're not just reading about this stuff from a textbook, you've actually been in the trenches.
Exactly. And I've made every mistake in the book. I've offended people without meaning to. I've stood there completely lost in a conversation even though I spoke the language. I've laughed at the wrong moment. I've been too direct when I should have been more subtle. So I really do come at this from a very human, very humbling place.
I love that. And that's exactly the vibe of this podcast. We keep it real here, no sugarcoating. So let's just jump right in. Sophia, when we say small talk, what do we actually mean? Because I feel like the phrase itself can be a little misleading.
Right, so small talk, the name suggests it's small, it's trivial, it doesn't matter, and that is so completely wrong. Small talk is actually one of the most sophisticated forms of human communication. It's the social glue. It's the ritual that people perform to signal to each other, hey, I see you, you're safe, I'm safe, we can exist in this space together.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it. It's like a social ritual.
Exactly. And when you understand it that way, you start to realize that getting small talk wrong isn't just a language mistake. It can actually send signals you never intended to send. It can make you seem rude or cold or arrogant or strange, even when you're trying your absolute best to be friendly.
So the stakes are actually pretty high.
The stakes are high, and the frustrating part is that nobody teaches this explicitly. Native speakers learn it from birth, through observation, through trial and error. It's completely unconscious for most people. So when a language learner asks a native speaker, "Why do you say that?" most native speakers can't even explain it. They just say, "I don't know, it just sounds right."
Which is the most unhelpful answer in the world for someone who's trying to learn.
The most unhelpful answer. So that's really what we're here to unpack today.
Okay, so let's build the foundation here. Can you walk us through why does small talk exist at all? Like from an anthropological or linguistic standpoint, what is its function?
So there's actually a concept called phaedic communication, which was coined by the anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski back in the 1920s. And phaedic communication refers to communication that isn't really about exchanging information, it's about establishing social bonds. It's about signaling that you belong, that you're part of the group, that you're operating within the social norms.
So when someone says, "How are you?" they're not actually asking how you are.
Precisely. They are performing a social ritual. They are saying, in effect, I acknowledge your presence and I am a friendly person operating within the expected social norms. That's what "how are you" actually means in American English, for example.
Which is so confusing for language learners because they take it literally.
Oh my goodness, yes. I have heard so many stories and experienced this myself where someone asks, "How are you?" as a greeting, and the language learner launches into a detailed explanation of how they're actually feeling, and the native speaker is standing there like they weren't expecting that.
They wanted, "Fine, thanks," and they got a therapy session.
Exactly. And the learner wasn't being weird, they were being sincere. They thought the question was genuine, but in that context, it wasn't. It was purely phaedic.
So right from the very first greeting, there are these hidden rules that nobody tells you.
And it gets more complicated because the rules change depending on the context. "How are you?" from your doctor is a genuine inquiry. How are you from the cashier at the grocery store is a greeting ritual. Same words, completely different function, completely different expected response.
Context is everything.
Context is absolutely everything, and native speakers switch between these contexts automatically without even thinking about it. Language learners have to learn to do this consciously, which is exhausting and takes a lot of time.
So talk to me about the actual content of small talk. Like, what topics are considered safe? What are the go-to small talk topics in, let's say, American English?
So in American English, the classic safe topics are what I call the big five of small talk. You've got weather, sports, food, local events like what's happening in the city, and then vague positive statements about life. Things like, things are great, been staying busy, can't complain. Very vague, very non-committal, but very friendly in tone.
Can't complain is such a classic one. That's such an American phrase.
It's so American, and it means essentially, my life is fine, I have no major catastrophes to report, and I don't want to bore you with details. That's the full translation of can't complain.
I love that. So what about in British English? Because I feel like there are differences even within English-speaking cultures.
Oh, huge differences. So in British English, the weather is still number one, arguably even more so than in American English because the weather in Britain is genuinely unpredictable and it's a universally shared experience. But the tone is different. British small talk tends to be a little more understated, a little more ironic. There's a lot of self-deprecating humor. And there's a real cultural emphasis on not being too enthusiastic, not being too positive, because that can actually come across as fake or trying too hard.
Interesting. So if an American said, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing, you're incredible, I love this," in a British context,
it might come across as slightly over the top. The British response to something good is more like, "Oh yeah, not bad actually." And not bad is genuinely high praise in British English.
that is wild. Not bad is a compliment? I would be so offended if someone said not bad to me about something I was proud of.
And that's exactly the cultural collision that happens. An American might think the British person is being dismissive or cold, when actually they're giving sincere, warm approval. And the British person might think the American is being insincere, because nobody can possibly be that enthusiastic all the time.
So both sides are misreading each other.
Both sides are completely misreading each other based on their own cultural framework. This is what I call cultural noise. It's the interference that comes from applying your own culture's rules to someone else's communication style.
That is such a good concept. Cultural noise. I want to come back to that. But before we go further into the cultural comparison piece, I want to ask you about something that I think a lot of listeners are probably wondering. Is small talk different for introverts and extroverts? Because I feel like for some people, small talk is genuinely painful.
Oh, absolutely. And this is so important to acknowledge. Small talk is a learned skill, not an innate talent. Even native speakers find small talk uncomfortable sometimes. Introverts, and I include myself in that category, can find the constant social performance of small talk genuinely exhausting. But here's the thing, being introverted doesn't mean you're bad at small talk. It just means it costs you more energy.
So it's not a personality limitation, it's an energy management thing.
Exactly. And the good news is that because small talk has rules, because it's actually a structured, learnable skill, introverts can often excel at small talk once they understand the system. Because introverts tend to be thoughtful, they tend to be good listeners. And listening is actually one of the most powerful small talk skills there is.
Wait, really? Listening? Most people think small talk is about talking.
This is one of the biggest misconceptions. Small talk is actually more about listening than talking. The person who makes everyone feel great in a social situation is usually the person who listens attentively, asks good follow-up questions, and makes the other person feel heard and interesting, not the person who talks the most.
And also be curious about other cultures. Instead of seeing cultural differences as obstacles, see them as one of the most fascinating things about being human. Every culture has developed its own unique genius for how to connect, how to care for each other, how to navigate life together. When you learn another culture's communication norms, you're not just learning small talk, you're learning a whole new way of seeing the world.
That is such a beautiful way to put it. And I think that's a perfect place to end. Sophia, you have been an absolute wealth of knowledge and insight today. Where can our listeners find more of your work? Where can they follow you?
Thank you so much, Marcus. I have a website. It's sophiachenlinguist.com, where I have articles, workshops, and resources specifically for language learners. I'm also on social media. You can find me as @SophiaChenLinguist, and I put out free content regularly, including podcast episodes of my own called Language Without Borders.
Language Without Borders. We'll put a link to all of that in the show notes, listeners. Make sure you go check out Sophia's work because everything she does is gold. Sophia, thank you so much for being here today. This was genuinely one of my favorite conversations on this podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. This was such a joy. Your listeners are so lucky to have you breaking this stuff down for them. I'm going to be recommending this episode to all my clients.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you. Okay, listeners, that is a wrap on today's episode of Real Talk. If you got value from this conversation, and I genuinely believe you did, please share this episode with someone who's working on their English communication skills. Leave us a review. It helps so much. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you, or rather, you'll hear me, in the next episode. Until then, keep talking, keep connecting, and remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being real. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hey, before you go, I just want to say a genuine, heartfelt thank you for spending this time with us. Learning a new language is hard work. It takes courage, patience, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable and keep going anyway. If you're on that journey, I see you, I respect you, and I'm rooting for you every single step of the way. This podcast exists for you, so keep showing up, keep practicing, and remember, every great conversation you'll ever have starts with a simple hello. Take care. Talk soon. And we are back. Sophia, before the break, we were talking about small talk in American and British English. Now I want to zoom out and look at different cultures around the world, because I think for our listeners who are learning English, many of whom come from very different cultural backgrounds, understanding not just how English small talk works, but why it's different from their own culture is going to be incredibly valuable. So let's start with something I find fascinating. Personal questions.
Oh, yes, this is such a rich area.
Because in some cultures, asking someone's salary, their age, their marital status, that's totally normal. But in American culture, that can feel incredibly intrusive.
Right. So in American English, there's a very strong cultural value around personal privacy and individual autonomy. Your salary, your age, your weight, your relationship status, your religious and political beliefs, these are considered private information that you share only when you choose to. Asking these questions, especially when you've just met someone, is considered intrusive and actually a bit rude.
But in other cultures, those are just normal getting to know you questions.
In many Asian cultures, and I'll speak a little bit from my own Chinese heritage here, asking about age, marital status, whether you have children, even salary, these can be expressions of genuine warmth and interest. They're saying, I care about your life circumstances. I want to know you as a whole person. The intention is completely warm, but without that cultural context, an American receiving those questions might feel like their boundaries are being violated.
So the same question can mean completely different things depending on where it's coming from.
And here's where it gets really complicated for language learners. Let's say you're a Chinese person who has moved to the United States and you're learning English. You've mastered the grammar, your vocabulary is great, but your small talk instincts are calibrated to Chinese cultural norms. So you ask your American colleague, how much do you earn? Because in your mental framework, that's a friendly question. And suddenly the conversation gets very awkward and you have no idea why.
And the American colleague probably can't explain why either because they just feel uncomfortable and they don't know exactly how to articulate it.
Exactly. They just know it felt invasive, and now there's this weird tension, and nobody knows why. The Chinese person walks away thinking Americans are strange and standoffish. The American walks away thinking the Chinese person was rude and inappropriate, and both people were just doing their cultural best.
That is such a good illustration of why this stuff matters. Okay, let's go to another part of the world. What about Latin American cultures? Because I have some Latin American listeners, and I'm curious how small talk works there.
So Latin American cultures, and of course there's enormous diversity within Latin America, I don't want to overgeneralize, but broadly speaking, there tends to be a much higher value placed on warmth, personal connection, and building genuine rapport before getting down to business. Small talk isn't something you rush through, it's something you invest in. It can go on for a long long time, and that's considered respectful.
So if you try to cut the small talk short and get to the point quickly,
You might come across as cold, transactional, even disrespectful, like you don't value the relationship. Whereas in a very task-oriented culture, like, say, Germany or the Netherlands, cutting quickly to the point is a sign of respect for the other person's time.
oh, interesting. So what about German small talk? Because I feel like Germans have a reputation for being very direct.
Germans are famously direct, yes. And interestingly, there's a lot of debate about whether Germans do small talk at all in the way Americans understand it. In German culture, there's generally a preference for substance and authenticity over social performance. So, if a German person asks you how you are, there's a much higher chance they actually want to know.
Oh, wow. So the phatic communication thing we talked about earlier, that's much less pronounced in German culture.
Much less pronounced, and this can cause real friction. An American who moves to Germany might initially think Germans are unfriendly or cold because they don't do the enthusiastic, "oh my gosh, it's so great to meet you" routine. And a German who moves to America might find American friendliness confusing or even insincere, because from their perspective, if you don't really mean it, why are you saying it?
There's actually a term for this, right? Like fake American friendliness?
There is. In German, people sometimes talk about oberflächlich, which means superficial, to describe what can seem like the surface-level friendliness of American culture. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying American friendliness is fake. It's just that it operates on a different level. It's social lubrication, not deception.
Right, it serves a function. It's not that people are lying.
Exactly. It's a different cultural technology for creating social comfort. Neither is better, they're just different. But when they collide, it can create real misunderstandings.
Okay, let's talk about Japan because I know you live there and I'm fascinated by Japanese communication culture.
So, Japan is where my whole understanding of communication was completely dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. Japan has one of the most sophisticated, nuanced communication systems in the world. There's a concept called hane and tatemae, which roughly translates to your true feelings versus your public face. And in Japanese social interaction, particularly in formal or semi-formal contexts, tatemae, the public face, is dominant.
So people don't say what they actually think?
It's more nuanced than that. It's that there's a deep cultural value placed on social harmony, what they call wa. And maintaining harmony sometimes means that you don't express your personal feelings directly if those feelings might create conflict or discomfort. So instead of saying no, a Japanese person might say something like, "that would be difficult," or "I'll think about it." And for someone from a direct communication culture, this is incredibly confusing.
Because they think they're maybe saying yes or maybe, but actually they're politely saying no.
Yes, and if you push, if you say, "so is that a yes or a no?" you've now put them in an awkward position where they have to be more direct than they want to be, which creates awkwardness and potentially damages the relationship.
So the communication style itself is the message.
Beautifully put. Yes, the how is as important as the what. In Japanese business small talk, for example, there are very specific rituals. The exchange of business cards is a whole ceremony. How you hold it, how you look at it, where you place it, all of this communicates your level of respect. And then the topics of conversation are carefully chosen to avoid anything that might create discomfort.
What are safe small talk topics in Japan?
So the seasons are huge. Japan has a very deep cultural connection to the changing seasons, and commenting on the season, the cherry blossoms, the autumn leaves, the summer heat, is a universally safe and genuinely meaningful topic. Food is always safe and much more detailed than you might expect. Japanese small talk about food can be surprisingly specific and enthusiastic. Work is a common topic, but it tends to be about the busyness of work rather than the specifics of what you do. And sports, particularly baseball, is a very reliable small talk topic.
What about personal life? Family, relationships?
More carefully handled than in, say, American culture. You might ask if someone is married or has children, but you don't probe too deeply. And you absolutely do not discuss problems openly in a casual social setting. If someone asks, "how are you?" in Japan, the expected answer, much like in America actually, is positive and brief. You don't share your difficulties with people who aren't close to you.
That's interesting. So Japan and America are actually similar in that regard. The "how are you" expects a positive positive, surface-level answer.
Yes, though for somewhat different reasons. In America, it's partly about optimism culture and not burdening others. In Japan, it's more about not creating discomfort or negativity in the shared social space.
Fascinating. Okay, let's talk about the Middle East briefly because I know there's a huge Muslim community among our listeners.
So, broadly speaking, and again, massive diversity in the region, Arab and Middle Eastern cultures tend to have very elaborate greeting rituals. When you meet someone, especially someone you haven't seen in a while, the greeting can go on for several minutes. Multiple exchanges, asking about family members, expressing warmth and blessings. These aren't things to rush. The length and elaborateness of the greeting itself communicates the depth of the relationship.
So a long greeting is a compliment.
A long greeting is absolutely a compliment, and if you cut it short, it can signal that you don't value the relationship. In contrast, an American or North European person who meets an Arab colleague might think the elaborate greeting is eating into work time and try to speed things along, which can come across as cold or disrespectful.
Again, collision of cultural frameworks.
Constant collision, and hospitality is such a central value in many Middle Eastern cultures. If you visit someone's home, refusing food or drink, even if you're not hungry, can be awkward. There's often an expectation that you accept, at least symbolically, as a sign that you welcome the warmth being offered to you.
That's so different from, say, a British context, where if the host offers a second cup of tea and you say, "Oh no, I'm fine, thank you," they take that at face value.
Exactly. In some cultures, you have to refuse twice before you actually mean it. In others, your first refusal is taken seriously. Knowing which context you're in is crucial.
This is so much information. I feel like our listeners' heads might be spinning a little bit. But I think the key takeaway from this section is that there are no universal rules. There are only cultural defaults. And the first step is recognizing that your own defaults aren't the only option.
Perfectly said. And the posture that will serve you best in any cross-cultural situation is curiosity, not judgment. Instead of thinking that's rude or that's weird, think that's interesting. What does that communicate in their framework? Because 9 times out of 10, behavior that seems strange is actually deeply logical within its own cultural system.
Okay, I want to shift gears now because we've been talking a lot about words, about what people say, but communication is so much more than words. Sophia, let's talk about body language and nonverbal communication, because I think this is another area where language learners get into trouble.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics. So research, most famously by Albert Mehrabian in the 1970s, though his findings are often overstated, suggests that a huge portion of emotional communication is nonverbal. It's tone of voice,